This is it, fellas. We are finally here. It is week 14 of the fantasy football season. One more week until fantasy football playoffs so you guys can make your championship runs. But first, we got to talk about the biggest waiver wire pickups for week 14 to help bolster your fantasy lineup heading into the fantasy playoffs, maybe help you get that final win that you need to secure a bye, final win that you need to get yourself into a playoff position. So we're not going to waste any time. If you guys enjoyed at any point, leave a like down below, subscribe to the channel if you're new around here. Now let's get into it. All right, so before we get into the video, make sure these players are rostered. In this video, I only cover players that are rostered in less than 40% of Yahoo, Sleeper, and ESPN leagues combined. These players are not available in a lot of leagues, but if they are on your waiver wire, make sure to go and pick them up. So Antonio Gibson, 55% rostered right now. Brian Robinson was banged up in last week's game with a hamstring injury. He might be the starting back going forward. Keaton Mitchell, 43% rostered right now. He has edged out Gus Edwards before the bye in terms of overall usage in the Ravens backfield, so make sure to keep an eye on him. Noah Brown and Elijah Moore, two wide receivers that could be thrust into bigger roles with Tank Dell now out for the season, and Elijah Moore potentially getting an Amari Cooper-less week this week because he did suffer a concussion last week. And of course, we did see the chemistry he had with Joe Flacco, but those guys are widely owned. I would definitely pick them up if you need a starter this week, but honorable mention also to any handcuff stashes that I don't talk about in this video that are available. For those of you guys who are in deeper leagues, Zamir White, Michael Carter, Elijah Mitchell, guys like that won't see their names on this list, but I do think they're fine stashes if you're holding, whatever running back, wide receiver that has no upside. Heading into the fantasy playoffs, we definitely want to stash those handcuffs like I talked about in last week's video. So now let's get into my top 10 waiver ads for week 14 of fantasy football. Number 10 on this list is Michael Wilson, wide receiver of the Arizona Cardinals. I talked about it on last week's waiver show, but basically at this point in the season, the only types of wide receivers that I would be willing to pick up are rookie wide receivers who have a chance to break out down the stretch. And if you guys need help at your flex positions because you lost Tank Dell or you lost Ramondre Stevenson or whatever the case is, I do think that Michael Wilson could be a viable starter going forward. He has missed the past 3 games with a shoulder injury, so we haven't actually seen him on the field with Kyler Murray at all this season. Marquise Brown did re-aggravate his heel injury, so that could open up some targets in this offense. And Michael Wilson has an average depth of target of 14.5 this year, and Kyler Murray has shown the propensity to push the ball downfield in years past, so he definitely could be a spike week guy once he returns to the lineup. So keep an eye on Michael Wilson. Definitely not spending any fab on him, but worth a speculative ad if you have a low upside option on your bench right now. So number 9 on this list is Demario Douglas, and I would say he is the premier option for those of you guys that did lose somebody to injury. Maybe you need an immediate flex producer right away. Bye weeks are over for the most part too, but the Commanders and the Cardinals are also on bye as well this week in addition to some of those injuries that we saw. So like I said, if you lost Christian Kirk, if you lost Tank Dell, if you lost Ramondre Stevenson, I do think you can take Demario Douglas right off the waiver wire and throw him into your flex. He plays the Steelers this week, who rank 23rd in adjusted fantasy points allowed to wide receivers, and he has 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 targets the last couple games that he has played. He did miss last week with a concussion, but he should be back in week 14. So number 8 on this list is more in the vein of a stash for the fantasy playoffs type of option. So if you need immediate production, probably just skip over this guy. Leonard Fournette, running back of the Buffalo Bills. He's been on the roster for about 4 or 5 weeks now, and he has yet to be activated into the active roster. But Fournette is an interesting stash for a couple of reasons. Number 1, teams make adjustments during their bye week, and they might look over the film and might not be overly satisfied with what Latavius Murray has given them in that short yardage role, and Leonard Fournette might be the reason that they added him, right? They might like him better in that role than they do Latavius Murray. Number 2, Leonard Fournette has dual handcuff upside. If anything happens to Latavius Murray, if anything happens to James Cook, I think he would be thrust into action. And number 3, he has fresh legs too. He hasn't played all season, and he can handle a workload as we've seen in years past. So With Leonard Fournette, if you guys need a stash option to just help line your bench with some upside, I do think Leonard Fournette could be the type of guy that shows himself to be useful come week 15, week 16, week 17 of the fantasy playoffs. But for now, he's probably just going to eat up a bench spot and kind of wait and see what you get out of him. So number 7 on this list is Ty Chandler, who's rostered right now in 27% of leagues, running back for the Minnesota Vikings. His appeal is obvious. I don't think I'm breaking any news here. The Vikings offense gets Justin Jefferson back this week, and that should really buoy their offensive output. And should anything happen to Alexander Mattison, we know that Ty Chandler would be thrust into a big workload. But the usage of these two backs the past couple weeks has been relatively puzzling. Sometimes they rotate by drive. Sometimes we saw, Chandler out-snap Alexander Mattison in the first half of the last game that we saw from them in week 12. Regardless, even if Ty Chandler never outright wins this starting job over Alexander Mattison, he's a solid RB2 if anything were to happen to him. So he's a decent stash in case he can actually outright win this job, but for the most part, he's probably just a handcuff. So definitely stash him at the end of your bench if you guys need some handcuffs to line your bench with. Number 6 on this list is Chase Brown, who looked absolutely incredible on Monday night. I was a huge fan of Chase Brown coming out of Illinois. He was my 6th highest rated running back in the entire class. He carried the ball 9 times for 61 yards against the Jacksonville Jaguars defense, which has been very strong against the run. He looked elusive. He looked explosive. Joe Mixon's the lead back here. We know he's probably not going anywhere. Unless Joe Mixon were to get injured, Chase Brown is probably useless, and you probably can't ever start him. But it appears Chase Brown has at least leapfrogged Travion Williams on the depth chart as Joe Mixon's primary handcuff. And Mixon is older. He's got a lot of tread on his tires, and Jake Browning appears to be competent enough to make sure that this offense can score points and sustain drives with the help of course, Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and all the other guys that are very talented for that offense. So if you need a stash for the fantasy playoffs, I do think Chase Brown is one guy that could really show himself to be very useful down the stretch. So number 5 on this list, so now we're getting into the top 5, we have Jonathan Mingo, who I talked about on yesterday's live stream, and I also talked about it with Michael Wilson. If I'm going to stash any wide receivers at this point in the season, I want them to be rookies, guys like Jonathan Mingo, who have shown trends in positive directions. As you guys can see on the screen, he has been trending very well the last couple weeks, getting 6, 7, 8, 10 targets this past week, 38% target share this past week. With Bryce Young, he got an end zone target. He scored a season high 13 PPR points. He had 6 for 69 on 10 targets. It's the second week in a row he's gone over 60 yards as well. So with Jonathan Mingo, I wasn't a huge fan of the prospect, but it does appear that the new shift in coaching staff and the way that he's been able to play better is going to result in him getting more volume, and he could be a viable flex option down the stretch of the season, and who knows, maybe he actually explodes and kind of breaks out down the stretch of the season. So Jonathan Mingo, definitely worth an upside swing at the end of your bench. Number 4 on this list for me is Tyjae Spears, who is rostered right now in 36% of leagues. Derrick Henry reportedly suffered a concussion in week 13. We've now since heard that he is not in the concussion protocol and he didn't suffer a concussion, but regardless, he's an older running back. He has a lot of tread on the tires, and Tyjae Spears has been very productive when he's gotten opportunities. He has a top 20 graded running back according to PFF, a top 20 graded receiving back according to PFF as well. And Tyjae Spears last week, when I did the playoff mustaches video, found his way into the tier 1 of playoff stash handcuffs because, like I said, he is a very talented player, and if anything happened to Derrick Henry, he would probably be a low-end RB1 for the rest of the season. So number 3 on this list is Kenneth Gainwell, who also is a very highly valued handcuff. We don't know what the health status is of DeAndre Swift. He got hit pretty hard at the end of that San Francisco 49ers game. No details have emerged yet on whether that injury is serious, whether it's minor. I think if it was serious, we probably would have heard by now, so it's probably not a big deal. But regardless, we know DeAndre Swift has not been the poster child of health. He could have suffered potentially a rib injury or a shoulder injury at the end of that game, and Gainwell is a highly sought-after handcuff given the offense he plays in. We know that the Philadelphia Eagles could make literally any running back fantasy relevant, so if he's available, he's definitely a great stash, especially considering that Swift is now actually banged up with an injury, and we know his history in that department. So number 2 on this list we have is Roschon Johnson, who was on bye this past week, but before the bye, he was actually my number 1 waiver target of week 13, who I talked about, if you guys are in a winning position, you want to stash him through the bye because he's a great option. He played a season-high 75% of snaps in week 12 before the bye with Khalil Herbert healthy on the field. So that was a significant development. We had never seen to this point in the season Roschon Johnson outright out-snap Khalil Herbert, and definitely not to that degree. It was 75% of the snaps to like 25%, which is a huge huge swing for Roschon Johnson. Of course, D'Onta Foreman was out for that game, and we don't know what the backfield usage would look like if D'Onta Foreman was healthy. But regardless, Roschon Johnson has a number of things going in his favor. Number one, like I said, he had a great snap share before the bye. Number two, he's a rookie running back, and we often see post-bye rookie bump season take effect at this point in the season. And number three, we don't know if D'Onta Foreman's even going to be back. So regardless of whether you need a productive piece or not, Roschon Johnson is worth a great speculative add, and you'd be wise to assume that his continuing great usage is going to go on after the bye week, because we typically don't see rookie running backs just flash a great usage game and then disappear altogether. So at the very least, he might be a really good stash, and who knows, maybe we'll get word that he's going to be the starting running back going forward. We might get that report this week, and you could probably throw him into your flex spot as soon as week 14. So definitely go out and spend whatever remaining fab you have left on a guy like Roschon Johnson. And again, number one on this list is also somebody that you would want to spend any remaining fab that you have left if he is available. Ezekiel Elliott barely meets the threshold here. He is available in 38% of leagues right now. Ramondre Stevenson suffered what fantasy doctors and what Adam Schefter has now since confirmed, a right high ankle sprain. And we know high ankle sprains are finicky. The x-rays were negative, so there wasn't a serious high ankle sprain here, but it is very likely that he's out at least this week, if not a number of weeks going forward, and maybe out for the rest of the fantasy football season and the fantasy football playoffs. Ezekiel Elliott has been solid this year, so if you guys are worried, Zeke is dust, he's not going to carry the ball very well. He's actually the 36th graded running back according to PFF out of 61 qualified, and he grades very similarly to guys like Josh Jacobs and Najee Harris. So he's been pretty decent this year, and we know from his Dallas days that he can carry a big workload. We know that unequivocally he can be a workhorse running back, carry 80, 85, 90% of the team snaps, and he can contribute as a pass catcher as well. Ramondre Stevenson was RB6 in points per game coming into this week since week 6. So even though this backfield and this offense is not very good, the volume alone can propel Ezekiel Elliott to a top 20 running back rest of the season, a top 15 running back potentially on volume alone. So he is a very, very good option, especially if you lost Ramondre Stevenson, if you lost Christian Kirk, if you lost Tank Dell. I would drop whatever fab you have left on Ezekiel Elliott, because you are going to be able to use him for the rest of the season by the looks of it. So if you guys enjoyed this video, if you got some value from it, leave a like down below, subscribe to the channel if you are new. If you guys want a bonus video podcast episode from us every single week, you need to sign up over on flockfantasy.com. When you use the promo code FSC, you'll get 30% off plus 6 months for free if you sign up annually. And trust me, you're going to want to sign up annually because we have a lot of cool stuff coming to the site. Our brand new trade calculator now has rookie picks involved. So if you guys are playing in dynasty leagues and you want an accurate trade calculator that accounts for your league settings, accounts for the fact that studs are more valuable, this is the only one that you'll find on the market right now. So definitely check out the link down below in the description and in the pinned comment for flockfantasy.com. The bonus episode that we're doing this week is quarterback rankings for the 2024 draft. Next week, we'll be doing running backs. The week after, we'll be doing wide receivers. You definitely don't want to miss that. We already talked about dynasty trade targets at every position, as well as dynasty trade strategy during the season. So those two videos already up live and ready for you to watch. And also, like I said, positional rankings early for the 2024 draft are coming up. So if that interests you, check it out down below in the pinned comment. But with that being said, peace out, and we'll talk to you soon.